Good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody out here tonight. Look like we've got a really good crowd on here that's live with us. And if you happen to be running your camera, if you will, turn your camera off. That way we can save some bandwidth along the way. If you will, if you'll mute as well. But great to see everybody on here tonight. And we're going to start with some, we're talking about seed starting tonight. We're talking about transplants. Gardening is going to happen before long. It is cold out there. They're calling for snow. Depend on if you are what side of the, I guess you could say what side of Pine and Black Mountain you're on, or if you're down in Mountain City, Tennessee. I guess it just depends on where you're at. But I mean, they're calling for a couple of inches, maybe on the Kentucky side, and I think the Virginia side, maybe 4 or 5 inches. And Mountain City, you might as well just say they're liable to get a foot down there. So, and Billy's got his hands up. Billy's waving his hands like, no. And so, but before long, we're going to be doing some gardening. And so definitely we need to cover some transplants, growing your own transplants, start from seed, that sort of thing. So, I'm Jeremy Williams. I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Agent here in Harlan, Kentucky, and we're kind of tag teaming myself, and we're going to turn it over to Bill Ward, who is Ag Agent in Johnson County, Tennessee, and then Shad Baker's Ag Agent in Letcher County is going to jump on here as well. So we're missing Phil and Rob tonight, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Billy and let him get started with the presentation.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. So give me just a second and let me pop up this real quick. And hopefully you can see that. Does that look okay? Okay. Can everybody see that screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So I know when we were talking about this, thank you for that great introduction, Jeremy. And it leads right into kind of what I wanted to talk about when we were kind of planning these meetings about this seeds and transplants. It's like, man, it was in January a few weeks ago. It's like, it's seed catalog season. So we have Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then seed catalog season, which I always like to save until after the Christmas holiday. It gives us something to look forward to. So this is a time where a lot of our market gardeners are already buying seeds and looking at seeds, but maybe you've got a stack of seed catalogs and you're thinking about, well, what about maybe it's doing some transplanting. And I'm just going to give you some ideas and some tips about what to do before. It'll kind of whet your appetite for Jeremy's presentation and just give you some heads up there, I think. So the first thing you do before even thinking about transplanting or buying seeds is to go measure your garden. How much space do you have to work with? These two images here are kind of the ideal. It looks beautiful. It's perfect. But more often than not, we end up kind of with things like this. So go out. I always like to go out, and every year we change ours a little bit. So measure how much space we have, how much space we want to dedicate to particular varieties, and then how much space those varieties need. Tomatoes in particular, I've always thought, I still have to watch myself. You put those little tomato plants and you space them out in May, and it just looks like it's a mile in between them. But before long, if you're not careful, you'll end up with a tomato jungle, which is really just going to asking for diseases and a lot of problems. Sunshine and air movement, it goes such a long way in keeping our plants healthy. So measure how much total space and then figure out how much space you might want to dedicate to certain plant types and varieties. Is kind of how I always like to start it before we even consider buying seeds. And then what about sourcing seeds? So this is a really interesting one. Growing up, we always heard never buy seeds from big box stores. And, doing some research and talking to some folks, there's really not a good reason not to do that, but there are maybe some better options for you. So like I said, it's seed catalogs are great. They will, if you're not careful, you'll end up with a lot more seeds than you'll have room in your garden, but they're a really good start. But what I always ask people to do is to go to your local farm and garden stores. We have several of those in Johnson and around Johnson County that are privately owned. We have some co-ops, And they do a really great job of keeping fresh, certified seed on hand in the spring in several different types of quantities. One store in particular that I really like to shop at, they have all their seeds fresh come in, and they'll have those in big gallon and sometimes 2-gallon jars, and they will dish out per weight how much and how many seeds you want. So it's a really great way to get a lot of variety and a lot of good fresh garden seed. Usually they're very helpful and knowledgeable too about what's working really well, what people liked last year. And sometimes if you get there early enough, maybe you've seen something in the catalog that you like, take that catalog. They've been really good to work with me and to find some really offbeat things. They usually have to buy it in larger quantities, but usually if you're interested in it, someone else is interested in it as well. And they've had no trouble selling those. So I always like to get my appetite whetted by the seed catalogs when the snow's blowing, and then take and go see what my local farm and garden supply is going to be offering, and maybe what they could get for me. Sometimes if you want some really unique varieties of things, those catalogs are probably your best bet, and there are a lot of good ones. There are several regional companies that have seed catalogs, and they do a really great job. There are some that are in the Midwest and upper Midwest, and then even some in New England. So talk to your neighbors, talk to any kind of market gardeners, see what they're using and where they're getting their seed from. It's always a good way to do that. And then like this picture shows, not so much, well, I can't say that actually. We have several neighbors that raise some really great varieties of heirloom tomatoes, and they're a great place to get some seeds, is your neighbors or people that are doing raising some of their own and saving those seeds, some seed swapping. It's especially like beans in particular, tomatoes, and we have some people that save some pepper seeds, some squash seeds, some winter squash mostly, and they're a really great way to meet some people and have some fun and unique varieties. So there's no lack of places to find seed, but you always want to look for the freshest seed, hopefully certified disease-free seed, and some place that's really going to be able to maybe have a lot more turnover and know more about your seeds than maybe some of the big box stores can. So several different places there. And really this one, I'm going ahead and put this up here because you may want to take some notes, and you might want to maybe even take a picture with your phone. I think we do that now. So maybe you buy some tomato seeds. Most packets, just kind of looking and doing some very fine counting, usually a packet of tomato seed will have between 40 and 60 seeds per packet, and that will vary. So you definitely want to be sure wherever you buy seeds, if you're ordering those, how many seeds will be in that packet, usually approximately. You know, if you look at ounces, see a few ounces go a long way. Someone was asking about, they wanted to buy a ½ ounce of seed of tomato seed. Well, a ½ ounces of tomato seed could be over 5,000 seeds. So usually packets are the way to go. But if you want several varieties, you may end up buying 4 or 5 packets, which could be a couple hundred seeds. So just something to keep in mind about that. And then it goes back to space. Well, how much space do you have, and how many tomato plants do you want to grow? I know University of Tennessee does, and University of Kentucky and Virginia, they have some great resources on home gardens and even some breakdowns of how many tomato plants per person. And I think what a really nice rule of thumb is, you know, if you just want to eat fresh tomatoes all summer, 2 or 3 plants per person. If you want to do some canning, you might up that to maybe 4 or 5 plants. So you're looking at maybe your 20 to 25 plants total for a family of 4. And something that even growing up that I always heard was, as my grandmother used to say, it's better to have a few that you take care of than a bunch that get ahead of you. So just something to keep in mind. Squash are really fun and easy to start as transplants, but again, how many crookneck squash do you want to eat? We eat a lot of squash blooms, so we'll plant a few extra just because we're going to have those blooms, and those are a lot of fun. But just kind of keep in mind that you might have some extra seed, and you want to keep those over, but they don't all last the same amount of time. So this little chart here just gives you an idea of, when you're buying seed, how long you can keep those. So, you know, the year you purchase them, for year one, onions, parsnip, parsley, and spinach, it's best to plant those. So you buy any of those in 2022, go ahead and plant them. If you have too many, give them away. You're not going to have a great germination rate in 2023. Particularly parsnip. I think parsnip is exceptionally underappreciated. So I encourage everyone to raise some parsnips. They're a little tricky, but they're a lot of fun and they're really tasty. We have some in our raised beds now that are tempting me. You can keep them in over winter. The problem is they're frozen in the ground. I can't get them out, but they're a great vegetable. Corn and beans and peas are really great seeds that we like to save. Best at about 2 years. You can keep them a little longer than that, and we'll talk about how. But really, you want to kind of rotate those out. And then we get down to the 5 years. We have a lot of the things that we like to transplant, like tomatoes and cucumbers. So about 5 years. But a lot of that's going to be dependent on how those were stored, whether you stored them or maybe a neighbor stored them. If you're getting them from a farm or garden store, they're probably okay. But if you're getting them from a neighbor, or if you have some leftover seed, how do you store those? And advance, please. There we go. So storage, cool, dry, and dark. Really the opposite of how you want your germination period to be. So cool, dry, and dark. A lot of people will recommend a refrigerator between 32 and 41. I know that it's been very common to put our seeds in the freezer, and you can do that. A lot of the seed banks will do that, but that's for long-term storage. If you're going to be rotating your seeds in and out very regularly, it's just best to go ahead and put them in a cool, dry, and dark place. The refrigerator can be a good one. It's probably better if you have a dedicated refrigerator for seeds, or a refrigerator you're not opening and closing a lot, or even if you're putting a lot of hot things in there and then frozen things and you're having temperature fluctuations. Temperature fluctuations will be harder on seeds than almost anything. So you want to just try to keep it cool. You want to retain those carbohydrates, right? And you want to try to keep it dry so you're not having to really reduce any type of fungal problems you might have. And then, of course, keep it dark. So usually you can tell, usually most seeds you'll get will be dry enough. But if you're saving seeds, that's probably another section that we can talk about. They need to be very, very dry to do this. And then the second one that I am guilty of, so I put it here to remind myself, is to label those seeds. The little farm support that we like to buy seeds from, they will dish your seeds up. They'll put it in a little packet. It'll tell you what it is, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the variety. They're not going to tell you the purchase date. So that's really easy. If you've got an excess, wrap them up, put them in the refrigerator, maybe put them in the back of the cupboard, which works well. And you pull them out in the spring and you're like, I'm always forgetful about, well, these 2 years old or are these 3 years old? So it's a very basic principle, but one that's so easy to forget. So you want to be sure and label them, put the variety, put that purchase date on there, and then put that viability period, right? That was on that previous chart. So bought them in 2022. And if you have a 3-year seed, you want to be sure and get those planted in 2025. I do recommend doing a germination test after a couple, 3 years of seeds, and your extension agent can help you with that. It's pretty easy to do. And then, this one's interesting. Iowa State and several university extensions offices recommend putting a little powdered milk or some uncooked rice in with your seeds. Moisture is a huge enemy. Humidity is a huge enemy of storing seeds. A lot of people put seeds in basements. That's going to probably be about the right temperature. It's going to usually be dark, but you might have a little bit too much humidity. So you're going to maybe have some fungal problems and things like that. So a little powdered milk. Shad, yes.
Billy, I was just going to say that our hort specialist had always told us about the 50-50 rule, 50 degrees and 50% humidity. And so that kind of hits right in the middle for most seeds. Now, you've had a question over here from Chiquita about keeping it in a dark room, such as a pantry. And I was just going to comment on it, that it's not that they won't keep that way, it's that you lose germination. So
exactly. Yeah.
Some of the seed will still survive, but if it's not optimal conditions, you're going to start to lose viability of a percentage of that seed. So when you go out to plant it, a lot of times you'll notice that maybe you do tomatoes and you'll plant 3 seeds in a cup, and maybe none of them come up or only one of them come up. It's because the germination has suffered somehow on that. So
right. And then, you know, some of those that can last 4 and 5 years, if your storage isn't right, if it's too hot or there's some stuff going on, you're going to lose germination. You might have something come up, like you said, but not the number that you really want or need. So yeah, so that's excellent, that 50-50. You want to keep it at that 100. So some powdered milk or uncooked rice, you want to bake. Actually put that in the oven if you wanted to do that way. It will absorb a lot of moisture, but you would definitely want to put that in a jar, and then you put a paper towel, and then you put your seeds on top of that. So you always want a barrier between your seeds and any type of absorbent material that you use. So, so anyway, that was just a quick rundown. And it's a good reminder for me. It helped me a whole lot because there's really nothing more fun than starting seeds this time of year, or actually maybe in the next few weeks, or getting ready to do that and buying seed to kind of get us excited for spring. But these are things that we can do now and things that we can think about all through the season. So especially after Jeremy gets us all excited. So anyway, does anybody have any other questions? I want to stop that share.
Billy, we had a couple there in the chat. Did you catch those?
I did not. Let's see.
Okay. We had one. Is it okay to keep seeds in a cool room, such as a pantry? For example, dried some tomato seeds and bean seeds late fall, last fall. They're labeled and in a cool pantry.
Right. I think that could be a good one. It goes back to Chad. You definitely want to keep that below 50 degrees and dry and dark. So I think that's a really great place to do that. You know, they used to have the old can houses, and I used to know people that would store potatoes, and they would put some bean seeds in their kind of potato house. It kept it cool all through the winter, didn't freeze, and even in the summer. So yeah, as long as you keep them cool and dry, yeah, they should do really well in dark. Okay.
Good stuff, Billy. Sounds good. Thank you very much. Great stuff.
Thank you.
I'm gonna jump in here with something that's a little bit what you mentioned. If you all could see this, it may be a little bit tough to see. That is a glass pimento cheese spread container. It's, you know, yay size or so, but in there is a note that says white greasy cornfield and lazy wife stick beans must be stuck on tall, strong stick. This stays in my desk drawer here at the house. And the house that I live in was my grandparents', and the handwriting on this note is my grandmother's, and my mama had written that, and she had saved those. And there's also another note inside that talks about how good the beans are, who liked the beans, where the beans came from. And so there's kind of a mixture of a couple of different varieties. So this is something we typically have seen in Appalachia over the years, which is kind of unique. I think definitely kind of unique to our region. So I just happened to think of that as Billy was talking, and wanted to throw that out there. Well, let me pull my share my screen here just a second. All right, can you all see that okay? Can y'all see that okay? Okay, sounds good. Good deal. So I'm just going to jump right in. There is a couple of publications, and the web addresses do not look good, but a couple of publications that we'll cover in here this evening, which is HO 56, Starting Plants from Seed at Home, and ID 133 vegetable cultivars for Kentucky Gardens. Shad and I both have put a lot of things in the chat. So what you may want to do is go to the chat before we shut down and click on those. That way they pull up in your web browser. So we'll cover both of those tonight. I'm going to let you all type in the chat pod. Basically, this is a question for you all. Why start plants from seed? What's your thoughts? You can even unmute if need be, blurt it out, or type in the chat pod. Either one works for us. Why start them? Shad says you get the variety you want. That's a good one. Anybody else? Give it another minute or something. See growing at all stages. Yeah. Anybody else? Continue family seeds. Exactly. These things, they stopped somewhere along the way. I guess they stopped in my basement and now in my office. Save money. Yeah. Anybody else? Great. Let's see. You have the plants when you want them. Exactly. And in recent, the last couple of years, that's been a tough one. And get a jump start on season. Definitely. Good answers. Let's see, we got one more came in. Healthier plants. Yeah. Good answers. Thank you all. So seed selection. Start with that new disease-free seed. That's a number one thing. And Billy had mentioned that when you go to your farm supply store, that you're looking for that new disease-free seed certified. I didn't add certified in there. When I was typing this up, I was thinking certified, but the word didn't get in there, Billy. I'm going to mention too, use disease-free saved heirloom seed. Billy hinted on that as well. In the summer, we get a lot of calls. Billy, Shad, Phil, Rob, and I, extension agents all over the country, get a lot of calls on anthracnose, and a lot of times that is carried over in seeds. So make sure the seed that you use is a disease-free seed, meaning your heirloom seeds. So a little bit about germination length. Each plant's going to be different with the maturity and maturity time, and select wisely and seed at correct times. And we'll get into that in just a minute. And those germination times are going to be listed in that HO56 that's in the chat. So make sure you pull that up. Here's some examples. You can see the plants down on the left-hand side and the temperatures that are needed for germination, which basically is 70 to 80 degrees there, depending on some of the things that's listed there. Temperatures for transplant plant growth during the day, you want to, in the 60s, at night in the 50s. A majority of those, you get into things like squash and tomato, they're going to be a little bit higher need. So you can see your cool plants up there, your broccoli and cabbage, cauliflower. You get down into your tomatoes, your peppers, they're going to need a little bit warmer temperature for germination. So I'm going to put this here, seed starting calculator. We can't necessarily tell you where to go to get this, company or what have you to buy from. But if you'll do a web search of seed starting calculators, there are a couple of companies out there that do a really good job of seed starting calculator to let you know that, if you're looking at planting on May the 10th, tomatoes or peppers, it allows you to go in there and step back of when you need to actually seed these, start your seeds from to transplant. So just do a web search there on seed starting calculator. And those things are handy. They're wonderful. They take a lot of math out. They take a lot of guessing out. And those calculators let you put in any variety, any date that you need, and they're really accurate. Good stuff there. A little bit about rooting and germination medium. And I will say, I learned recently that this buying of this stuff is not cheap. It is the price of this stuff has gone up, and you're buying it in what's called bales. The blocks that you see, things like vermiculite, things come in, and it's not cheap, unfortunately. But you want a medium, which is or a soil that should be well drained and well aerated. Doesn't need fertilizer at this time when you're doing the seeding. But at this point in time, you do not need a medium that's that's fertilized, so to speak. It does need to be sterile, free of insects and diseases. That's the number one thing. You don't want to bring something in that you don't have already, and then all of a sudden it just creeps up on you because of this. So the medium can be prepared from a combination of peat, vermiculite, or similar ingredients. You can mix it together, which is handy. I've done that before. If you're doing a lot, you can mix it, but you can also buy it commercially packaged growing medium, and it's available. And believe it or not, that's probably going to be your best way to go. It's already mixed. Unless you're doing a lot of transplants, you buy one bale of this stuff, and it's basically going to do you for all your transplants plus some. You can also use that as a loose medium or peat pellets. Peat pellets, I've used peat pellets from time to time. The only thing with peat pellets is it seems like the plant will get they're wrapped in a mesh, a biodegradable mesh, and those plants can tend to get root bound, and so you want to try to get that mesh off of there.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to hit on something you had said about the sterile soil. This is part of the reason why we don't recommend that you just get some dirt out of your garden and put it in a little pot. We get that question all the time. Why can't I just use soil from my garden? And you can't guarantee that that's not diseased in some way. And you can end up with dampening off and other root rot diseases that can hit the plant when they're just germinating. And when they're a little older, they're less susceptible to those diseases generally. So that's why you don't want to do that. And as far as the peat pellets and things, you and I had talked about this before the workshop, that not every plant prefers the same growing medium.
Exactly.
So I've had, tomatoes will do really well in those peat pellets, but I have had other plants that, that peat is acidic, and not every plant likes to germinate and grow in an acidic medium. So you might want to research that a little bit, and experience sometimes can be the best teacher. If you try it a few times and you see that the plant is kind of anemic and not, maybe it germinates, but it just kind of sits there, that might be an indication to you that it really doesn't like something about where it's growing. So just keep that in mind.
Exactly. Good word there, Shad. I had tried an heirloom green pepper last year, and it would not even germinate in a peat pellet. So there's definitely go and do, like Shad said, do some research on that. Thank you. So selection of containers. Containers need to be specifically for germination for the most part. Germination trays work great, but so do small drinking cups or cups made from newspaper. Just make sure it has a soy-based ink. Those cups, the homemade cups, like I said, from the newspaper, And I'm not talking about the glossy sales ads. I'm talking about the actual newspaper. Just make sure it's like I said, most of them are soy-based ink anyway. So, but you can make your trays work. You can make the drinking cups, the cups made from newspaper. Those work great. Containers, you need something that's 2 to 3 inches deep, and that works perfect. Also, containers, you need to have holes in the bottom for drainage. If it's a plastic container or a paper container that maybe has a wax coating on the outside, these containers need to have a hole in the bottom because if you get a little bit too much water in there, you don't want those transplants standing in there and they get wet feet and they start to get rot and they just will not do well. So definitely need a hole in the bottom for drainage. So a little bit on the sowing seed. Your medium before it's placed into the container should be damp, not soaked. It doesn't need to be where, it's got so much water that you can take your hand and ball it up, so to speak. Just make sure it's damp. Fill to about 1/2 inch of the rim of the container. So if you got your 2 to 3 inch deep container, about 1/2 inch from the rim. Your seeds, depending on the plant species, they need to be placed uniformly across that surface or sown in rows. Rate of 10 to 20 seeds per square inch. More space can be given for tomatoes or peppers. If you're using those containers or if you're using the trays with individuals, basically you're looking at 1 to 2 seeds per container or per basically 1 seed per unit in that tray. Cover seeds with a thin layer of germination media as well after that. So basically you're not poking a hole in there, putting the seed in. You're basically laying the seed over the top of the germination medium, and you're then covering it with a little bit more. Temperature requirements, like I mentioned earlier, you can see those in HO 56. We pulled that up earlier. Ideal temperature is going to depend on the cultivar that you're raising, but normally you're looking at the 70 to 80 degree range. A little bit on watering. Hand watering is the best on that. If you've got one of the small watering pots, if you got one of the kind of that allow it to sprinkle, that sort of thing, the sprinkling head instead of the large head, when it's big around as your thumb or finger or something like that. If you got one that'll sprinkle out a little bit, that way it's not beating those seeds into the ground or into the soil or possibly popping those seeds out as you're watering in. So hand watering is the best over using a hose, depending on where your situation's at. Using cold water sparingly and only when the soil feels dry. So this may not be an everyday thing unless your house is dry and drying the, if you're putting some in the house and it's drying out, quite a bit, when, if you've got a heat pump or, even, electric heat or what have you, and it dries the house out, you may have to keep checking on it. If you got a greenhouse, maybe not as much. So, using that water sparingly. Talk a little bit about growing, with the mini greenhouse. Using plastic is a great way to maintain humidity and moisture levels. After the seed is sown, place a piece of clear plastic over the top of the container. Basically, what that's going to do is act as a greenhouse. It's going to keep that moisture in there. It's going to keep it a little warmer. The container can also be placed inside of a plastic bag and sealed to prevent moisture loss. One of the things that we do here in Harlan County with our 4-H groups, our 4-H agent goes into the schools, and he has a tomato growing project, and they grow about 4,000 tomatoes a year in the schools. And one of the things is you have a peat pellet, and you put it in a small plastic cup. And so you put a little bit of warm water in there to make that peat pellet swell up. You put 2 or 3 seeds in there in that top of that peat pellet, and then put it in a clear plastic bag. And as they get started growing, you pull out the two smallest, just pluck them out, and those work great. So basically, those are very successful for the kids. They do a great job with them. They have a good time with them. So a plastic bag or a piece of plastic over the top is going to help you keep from losing moisture. It's going to help keep it a little warmer. Also, do not place in direct sunlight. This plastic will trap the heat and it's going to damage those seeds. And then when those plants start, it's going to wilt them pretty quick and probably kill them out. Also, as soon as the plants emerge, immediately remove that plastic. So basically, your greenhouse is just keeping the soil warm, keeping the humidity in there, and then all of a sudden, as soon as they pop out of the soil, remove the plastic, whether it's a sheet of plastic or over a tray, or if it's a plastic bag that you have several containers or cups of soil and seed in. So a little bit about growing the plant after germination. Those plants are going to need light, going to need plenty of light. It can be natural light, fluorescent light, or even grow lamps. When using sunlight, place containers as close to the window as possible without creating a temperature issue. And when I say temperature issue, it's cold. Those temperature, it's 15 degrees this morning. If you've got those sitting close to your window, it doesn't matter if it's, insulated window, double pane, whatever. It's going to feel that cool. And so you could actually cause some damage to the plant. So when using the sunlight, just be careful where you place that as well. For fluorescent lamps, place them about 6 to 12 inches above the plant and maintain light for at least 18 hours each day to get those started. The distance, one thing Shad and I talked about yesterday was the distance between those plants and the light is it's a big thing. That's where you get your more healthy plants. If it's too far away, you're going to have an issue possibly of the plants being spindly. They're kind of stemmy looking and just don't look great. So that's something you need to watch, is the distance between the light and the actual plant. So the transplanted seedlings should be transplanted into larger containers within a few weeks after germination. Don't let the seedlings become too crowded. So this is something you could look at before you actually seed. How big of a how big of a container is this going to go into? You may even want to start it out in a container that you're actually going to take and place into the garden. Or if you start it out in trays in the individual cells, you're going to have to transplant so they just don't become too, they'll get larger and they won't get root bound. So don't let those seedlings become too crowded. Also use the same type of growing media that you did for your transplants. Make sure that container has holes as well in the bottom for drainage. Also make sure that they've got that maximum amount of light available for best growth. Last week, we talked about lighting with houseplants. Basically, transplants are houseplants until they go in the garden. So they need that light. Temperature, like we covered earlier, needs to be in that 60 to 75 degree range, and need to receive light, and about 50 to 65 degrees in darkness, 60 to 75 degrees in the day, and 50 to 60 degrees during dark periods. So the growing media needs to be kept damp and well drained. It's one of those things like we talked about with the seeds. It doesn't need to be watered down, doesn't need to be soaked. Just make sure it's damp and well drained. Like I said, don't overwater. A little bit about fertilization. One application should be good enough, and you can use a complete fertilizer for that. And something that's a water soluble houseplant fertilizer it's going to be great. That way it's easy to mix up in your container, or if you're doing a lot, for your bigger containers, that sort of thing, your bigger containers that you're watering with. I also follow the rates listed for the fertilizer. Those water soluble fertilizer have a rate on the package. Always follow that. Plan the seed sowing date carefully so your transplant are ready to go into your garden on time. That goes back to that calculator, and use those calculators, or at least look on the package to look at the germination time, and that way you know when to start your seed sowing. The length of time from that sowing the seed until the plants are ready to be transplanted into the garden depends on that cultivar and the environment. So it's definitely going to change from peppers to cabbage, or tomatoes or cucumbers. So make sure you're following those rules, so to speak. Also, keeping records from year to year will help. One of the things that I talk about in a basic gardening class is keeping records, knowing what performs well, knowing what doesn't perform well. If it doesn't perform well, you may want to get rid of it. So keeping records are going to help. So any question? I see something there in the chat pod. Looks like Shad put up another really good link there.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to comment on that. After you've got them going, after you've got the transplants and they're ready to plant, that transition from where you have started the seed to the garden does not need to be done suddenly. Think of how you are in the springtime when you've been indoors all winter long. You're tan, if you're white like I am, your tan has disappeared, and that first day that you are out in the sun and you get burnt up. And plants are very much the same way. The grow lights that we use are not anywhere near as intense as natural sunlight is. So when you do these seeds, when it starts to be time to transplant them to the garden, that needs to be done as a gradual transition. They need to go from the place that you germinated them to a protected place that is getting some direct sunlight, but not for long periods during the day. It needs to be, maybe dappled shade. So maybe if you put them under a bush or something where they get some natural light, but it's a gradual process. And only after a couple of weeks of that do you actually put them in the garden. I've had this problem many, many times, especially with brassica type plants. That's your cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, those kinds of things, that when I move them into the garden, they get sun scald. And you'll see that they start to take on that white appearance, where the plant basically tries to shut down chlorophyll production so that it's not absorbing too much sunlight. And so if you do that gradually, you don't shock the plant. And so keeping them watered really well when you transplant them and doing it gradually. We also talked about problems that you might have on young plants in the garden. That may be cutworms, it may be birds. For whatever reason, Jeremy says he doesn't have this problem where he lives, but where I live, robins and starlings are especially bad to come in on summer squash, zucchini, those kinds of things, and rip the leaves off and fly away. And I know they're feeding on whatever the plant is, but that really stunts my transplants because they're taking off those early leaves, and those early leaves are very important in getting that plant established. So you might want to consider, if you have that problem, protecting those young transplants. Maybe if you've got dogs or cats or things that might step on the young plants, protect them. use little cages or some sort of a protection around them. Obviously, a fence would work for dogs, but it won't work for the birds. So give some thought to little cages or something on top of your transplants.
Great information, Shad, definitely. And Billy, thank you very much for the information you put in there as well. There's a lot of really good information in there that Shad and Billy both put in there. Really good stuff. Billy, you have anything else to add?
No, I'll just say a couple of things. I went ahead and UT has some pretty nice resources for home gardeners. So I popped those in there. The home garden variety trial, it's going to be probably similar to what you have in Kentucky, but it might have some different things. So especially up in East Tennessee, we're going to be very similar in climate. So you can definitely check those out. There's one on garden planning, which is pretty good. And then there's the home fruit and garden calendar. That's a fairly recent publication. We actually have some physical calendars, but that's really fun. It is set up for East, Middle, and West Tennessee, but it has some dates. It has a lot of great handy tips and tricks. So, you know, I get some physical copies of those. So if any of y'all want some of those, we can probably send them that direction. Would love to do that. But talking about types of transplants and some things like that, I've met some, we've had a new, I've never really experienced much. They're doing some transplanting or seed starting some sweet corn. So some of our market gardeners are doing that just to get a week or two ahead of the game. They do suffer a little transplant shock, they say, and they have to baby them a little bit. And I've seen that even one of our garden centers has started selling sweet corn transplants, which I have never seen before until 2020, which I thought was really interesting. And just as an aside, I find it super interesting. There was a farmer, a young woman, she was a fiddle player. I met her through music. She's from Maine. She came down here. She fell in love with sorghum molasses. I don't guess that's something they have up in Maine. And last I heard from her, she was back up in Maine and she was starting her sorghum, right, for her molasses in a greenhouse and transplanting that because that season was so short. The varieties that she had access to, they wouldn't mature at the right rate or something. So she's been doing that for a little while. I've lost touch with her. I don't know how successful, but transplanting and seed starting can be a lot of fun. You can do some experimentation with it. It's, you know, just a blast.
Jaquita, that was, I've responded, but I accidentally did it just to Billy. To answer your question, Amazon has multiple versions of those dibblers. So you might go on there and check those out. And I'm not recommending Amazon, by the way. I just did that as a quick response. Burpee has one as well.
Great information, guys. Good information tonight. Any other questions? Shad, Billy, good job. Good job this evening. Good information, definitely.
Thank you. I thought that was great. I think that's a, you know, great refresher and get everybody on the right foot, you know, especially even like Shad talking about some problems and some issues, you know, to think about beforehand. So yeah, thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome. Good stuff.
Rita, I'm not sure, Jeremy, she's asked a question about one of those dibblers that looks like a paint roller. Okay. And it's possible that some of these seed sources, we didn't really get into that very much. And I'm not, again, making any recommendations that, you know, for one company over another. But if you've never looked at them, they also sell things like this. But Seedway is a commercial seed supplier that also tends to have a lot of those seeders. So that might be a place to look for the dibbler. But yes, that's correct. It's all one word though. But RUP seeds, RUPP, and you know, if I'm from Kentucky, I'm going to like something that's got RUP in it. but that's a good seed company that we've had success with. And I'm just telling you some of the ones we've used. A lot of folks use Johnny, Harris. Billy, you had mentioned once before that, or somebody had, that there was a place called So True.
Yes, they're located in Asheville. So True Seed. They do a lot of some heirloom stuff. I have a friend in Knoxville who grows certain crops for them, specifically for seed. So they go through a pretty good vetting process too. So they seem to do a really good job. We've had success with their seeds. Mm-hmm.
In East Kentucky, we've got one that's Coddles seed. They sell a lot of seed in the eastern half of the state. And Jeremy, what's the one up in Winchester? Seems like there's one up there.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on what it is.
But I guess we're throwing out all these names, and part of the reason why I mentioned those is because they have a lot of the recommended varieties, and a lot of these seeds can be hard to track down. I've had many years where I wanted to grow a certain type of spinach or a certain type of broccoli, and I couldn't find it at my local farm supply. So I started looking for it in the seed catalogs, and you might go through 5 different companies before you find one that's actually carrying the variety that you want to try. And what was the one? Is it Fedco that's up in Maine?
Yes.
Fedco's got a lot of stuff too. So you might, if you get it, you can contact these folks through their website, and you'll get a catalog, and they send it year after year after year. So Billy mentioned the seed catalog season, and that's about exactly the way I look at it. I start getting Gurneys and Burpee, and I'm just covered up. I got one today from Indiana Berry. I don't know if y'all have gotten that one yet, but it came in the mail today, and that always makes me smile when I get my Indiana Berry catalog. But I would recommend that you have at least 5 or 6 good sources so that you've got a pretty broad selection of seed.
Good stuff. Good questions. Good questions.
Jeremy,
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to mention something when you showed your grandmother's seed jar.
Yes, ma'am.
And since we're talking about getting ready to start seeds, some of you may have done this as well, but it reminded me of my mama. She's been gone to be with the Lord for about 12 years now, but this time of the year, she would always fuss about the snow, and she would say, I just wish this old stuff would get out of here. And usually sometime around Valentine's Day, she would take what was left of the sweet potatoes that she had from the winter, because by then they're starting to get eyes and starting to, sprout a little. And she would put herself a sweet potato in a glass cup and set it in the window. And so my little mama grew sweet potato vines in the house for years. And I mean, I don't ever remember her putting that out in the yard, but that was how that she would have flowers in the winter, in February and March. Well, last year, I decided I was going to try that. And I had saved my sweet potatoes from the vines that I had grown in my flower pots the year before. Long story short, I grew about 5 different varieties of colors from things that I had saved. And then I planted them in my own flower pots. But I started them just like my little mama had done, and I had them right across my bar. So I told my mom the other day, I said, I'm going to have to find me some sweet taters because I don't have any in the pantry this year. I didn't put any up to save for next year. I don't know what I was thinking, but it's about time to start me some.
When that groundhog comes out and gives us sad news, you make sure you go straight away and start that sweet potato.
Great story. Thank you. Thank you, Jaquita. That is awesome. That is awesome. Everybody try that. Oh, good deal. Good deal. I'll tell you what, great evening. Thank you all for joining this evening. And we've got 2 good episodes coming up next week. On Tuesday, we have in-home air quality that we'll have somebody from here in Kentucky that's going to be taking care of that. She works for the Commonwealth of Kentucky here, and specifically specializes in in-home air quality. We see a lot of things anymore with things like radon, and radon's in the ground. It's something that's in the ground, and so definitely, something to be aware of, and just not just it, but just a lot of air quality. Having a healthier house, so to speak. So she's going to be covering a lot of that. Also on Thursday, I think it's pruning and sound collection that's going to be covered. So that's what's on tap for next week. And we thank everybody for coming out this evening. It's good to see everybody. It's a cold night. I think they're saying some cold temperatures this weekend. Anywhere between 1 inch of snow in Harlan, Letcher County to probably 48 inches of snow in Johnson County, Tennessee. So somewhere in between. But hopefully we're not spending the whole weekend shoveling snow. Billy, Shad, do y'all have anything to add before we close tonight?
Just going to say, apparently they don't have enough wind bags in East Tennessee, because there's enough hot air up where we are. We don't have to worry about those deep snows. You need to import some Kentuckians down there so that you don't have that snow.
Oh goodness. I'm shutting this thing down on that.
We better.
Good seeing you all.
It's great to see everybody this evening. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.